So welcome everyone to CU Digital Town Hall number 67. That's right. We have been through more than a year of these, and we're very excited to continue doing this. It's Wednesday, August 18th. And let's just talk a bit. My name is John Best. For those of you who may be new, we've been really reaching out. I don't know if you noticed, Mike, but we've been hitting the social webs, the interwebs pretty hard.
Guys are everywhere.
Yeah. And so some people may be new. So my name's John Best. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Best Innovation Group. We like to do cool things for credit unions. And Zach, who's over there, is one of our clients. He works with us in the Innovation Club, and we're happy to have him here today. We actually just had one of our meetings yesterday.
Oh, look at that.
The rest of the team got Dave too. So
Zach is showing off. You're showing off with your camera.
He's showing off. I don't like that. Yeah, make it shake its head up and down or left and right. That would be cool.
I don't know if it'll work that way.
Anyway, so check us out, Big Dash FinTech, and then my long time friend from before he ever had this was Mike Lawson, and Mike is the co-host the host of CU Broadcast. Probably the most informative show out there if you're in the credit union space. I know everybody I know watches your show, Mike.
Hey, thank you.
You are a celebrity in the CU space. You can't.
Well, I think the people that I have on the show are celebrities. They're the ones who do all the work. So
we
just deliver.
By the way, I'm really disappointed because I was supposed to be in my studio, and I finally bought a microphone so I could be cool like you. I tested it and everything this morning, and wound up hanging out here at Aztec. So
that's all right. Well, to be really, really cool, John, you got to hang it upside down like this.
Trust me, I had it cooler than that. Melissa can tell you. So let's move on to the next slide here. We'll talk about our sponsors. CUNA Councils. CUNA, if you have not gone to a CUNA show, Sundie, I assume you've spoke many times at CUNA, probably more than any of us can think of. You said you've been on stage a lot. I know, I don't think I've missed a year where I've not spoken to CUNA. So very exciting. And, what I love about CUNA is not just that they have a council for everything, but also just that they really facilitate the collaboration. That's what this meeting's all about, is facilitating collaboration to learn, to share, to get good ideas, and to proliferate them across the industry. And that's why CUNA is a partner. The newest and fastest and best core out there is Correlation. If you're not on, Correlation is a Keystone platform. It's probably the most state-of-the-art core at this point. And we're thankful to have them as a sponsor, and a lot of our innovations and stuff we do through Correlation. So great group. But we just mentioned CU Broadcast and Big, and we have some new sponsors. One of which is Bonify, which we'll be adding. For those of you that don't know Bonify, they're also Member Pass. Zach is one of the big users of Bonify.
That's right.
Zach, how many users you got using Member Pass now? Hope you got it. There you go.
Just crossed over 5,000.
5,000 people. So all you got to do is, if you're on the phone with them and they're not going to ask me 60 questions in your call center, right? They're not going to be like, hey, do 4 jumping jacks. And, oh, by the way, what's the PIN to your phone? Why do I have to give you that? Well, you want your account information, right? All I got to do is my phone pops up and it says, is it me? But the really cool part, you know what the coolest part about that is, Mike?
Yeah, what?
If it's not me, let's say somebody's trying to impersonate me to the Zach thing, I'm actually going to get the text. It's going to come to me. It's going to say, is this you? And I'm going to say, nope. I would like to have that for purchases with my wife. I think it would cause the divorce rate to go way up. Like, do you approve this? Nope, I do not. So anyways, it's a new feature I'm working on. I'll let you guys know about it. All right, well, let's move on to our guest. We are very fortunate today to have with us an expert and someone who's been there, Sundie Seefried. Sundie is presently the CEO of Safe Harbor Financial. I love that name, by the way. And that's hence the boat, which I like. You were out a CUSO partner in Colorado Credit Union in Denver. She was the former CEO there, and she retired after 38 years. Wow. She's been on stage tons of time, but now she's focused in on cannabis. And I thought it was an interesting topic. I'm in Colorado as well. Mike, it's legal where you are. And, just out of curiosity, if we can go into the chat, everybody, if it's legal where you are, just put in legal or illegal. I'd be interested just to know how many people we have on the call and what states they're in. Zach's trying to post right now. Illegal, legal. Okay. So, legal in Michigan. Okay. Wasn't sure of that. All right. There you go. So people are letting us know. So that's even the start of this. So, Sundie, right off the bat, how did you decide? You've been a stalwart of the credit union industry for years and years. And you retire and you go, you know what I think I'm going to do with my time now? I'm going to dedicate it to, weed and cannabis, right?
Well, you put it that way.
Well, I got some edibles and things look good to me. But in reality, though, I mean, it's an important concept. So tell us how you got there. How did you come to the conclusion that this was an industry that needed this? I mean, it's fascinating to me if you see the stores. We've seen 60-minute specials about them not being able to take cash because of the federal place. They don't really have a place to bank. It's pretty interesting. And so, especially now in the pandemic, give us the background. Give us the starting point on that.
Well, first of all, I was on my way to retirement, and it was probably late spring in 2014, right after they issued the guidance from FinCEN, and I was literally ready to retire. Well, that brought with it a whole different, position that put me in. So I had nothing at risk. Like if I had a retirement benefit, it was going to be payable in November. If I had anything to worry about, if I crash and burn, I could just leave the industry, and said I tried. But what really got me into it was the safety issue. I have to be honest with it. I was at drinks with a couple of attorney friends who were representing clients, and they just said, what is wrong with the financial institutions? Why can't you bank our clients? They really need bank accounts. And so I said, all right, I'll look at it. And all I thought was, I'm going to go to the regulator, and the regulator's just going to shake his head no, send me out the door, not say you can't, but not say you can, right. And just, right? So I figured that was going to happen, and then I could go back to these attorneys and say, I tried, right. End of conversation. Except when I went in to visit my regulator, I came out with a stack full of paper. and I'm like, no, that wasn't what I expected. So at that point in time, he was kind of counting on me to do something. And so I then went and visited one of the clients. And this was really key and turning point for me. Had I not sat down with those clients of this attorney, I may never have gotten there. But we sat down and I figured, okay, I'll learn a little bit about the industry. And they started talking to me, and it's a sad story. So they had bank accounts in, say, 3 or 4 different banking institutions. And in the middle of the night, they would pull their 2 children out of bed, bundle them up, put them in the car seat, put them in the back seat of the car. And you have to think they're carrying tens of thousands of dollars in that car because they're going out. They got 3 ATM cards. They're going to go to 3 different ATMs, and they're going to deposit this money with the kids in the back seat, right? And so I'm hearing this story and I'm thinking, how dangerous is this for everybody? And then they start talking about, well, it's stored in the house the rest of the time. And of course, people would like to say, oh, they're not in my neighborhood, but that's why I started banking my neighborhood first, right?
Right.
Because they're in everybody's neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, these clients weren't like, it's not like you met with some drug dealer guy from the corner. I mean, these things are legitimate retailers with really fantastic retailing schemes that if this was, it's the Apple store of cannabis, really. I mean, when you look at how they're selling this stuff, I mean, they really have very, I don't know if people have seen them who've been or everybody's gone out and seen them. And I think you're right. You have to sort of see it to get it. Like in downtown Denver, I popped into one once, but I got to say the smell. But other than that, it was like an Apple store, but cannabis. It really was. It was. So it's not a downscale kind of thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to paint a picture.
No, it's not. They're very clinical in their approach. The real story that got me that day, though, it just really knocked me off my chair. Safety definitely carried the day, but he looked at me as he's telling the story, and he says, by the way, why is it we can't make deposits over $9,000? And I said, how is it you know that? How do you know that? Because, it's called bank secrecy for a reason, right?
Right.
And he says, oh, my banker at this particular bank said, if you want to keep your account open, don't make any deposits over $9,000. Otherwise, it gets flagged and your account will get closed. And I sat back and I thought, all right, we're credit unions. We don't play that game. We're here to help people, not teach them to bank criminally. I am not that banker.
Right,
that was a decisive factor that
Wow.
somebody had to do something at that point in time. And then by the time I went back to the board in July, I said, here's what I've learned. Here's what you need to know. And they too, knew that they were at risk, but they said, go ahead and do another couple months worth of research and keep bringing it back to us. And
Wow.
they didn't shut the conversation down.
Wow. So another thing I noticed too, and I'm sure you've seen this, but when they were going over this on 60 Minutes, how dirty and horrible, like people who deal, like, Kevin Sarber's on, I think Kevin, from Westcom. And Kevin, we ran the ATM group, and I remember the people used to have to handle cash from that. Their hands would be almost black if we did, the gloves and stuff. And these guys are dealing with even more than that comes through their places. And so there was a health risk around it as well. I actually looked into it as well, because Brinks can't go there. You can't have like a gun or a firearm in the same place that there is cannabis, right? Is it something along those lines why Brinks can't go?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So,
well, no, Brinks can't go because Brinks doesn't want to handle cannabis cash. So, in to their credit, okay, these large courier services bank a lot of big banks. They bank, they do a lot of couriering for a lot of grocery stores, and they get the, top tier banks saying, I don't want my money mixed in with cannabis. Your whole facility's at risk. So they don't have a choice, right? Because cannabis was a small market in comparison to everything else they were doing. So that's why they didn't get into it. Although some of them are starting to jump back in now.
Interesting. So the board says, hey, go back and find out more. And what you walked away with is a purpose to say, hey, I got to find a way for these people to be able to deposit more than $9,000 so they don't get the SARS. And that they could legitimately bank with some institution and have the benefit of actual banking, the benefit of, because they also have to order all their supplies via, they don't have true accounting systems or things like that because there's nobody that'll take them. They're these renegade sort of groups. But yet across the country, as we've seen in the chat, the movement continues to grow to legalize it, state after state. So you walk away with this purpose from the board to help fix that. And how does that go from there?
I was not bought in at this point.
Oh, so you're not quite there yet. You're still like, I
was on the fence. On the fence.
What's the hurdle, Sundie? What's the hurdle? Is it the stigma still, or what's the hurdle? I don't want to say what's the holdup, but what's holding them back from the green light?
The board at this point, or myself?
I'm Sundie to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. My hurdle was I really was going to retire in November 2014.
That's a fair hurdle.
And life since then, I tell you. But interesting you ask about the board hurdle because I flew out to DC and met with NCUA with my business plan. I met with the CPAs with my business plan. I met with, another credit union who was doing it. I just did all this homework. And all I kept getting was, this is good. This is good. We think you can handle it. We're supportive. The only, real caution I got where they could not could not endorse it was legal, right? But how can legal endorse it? But, I got them in a moment of weakness. and I said, okay, after we do 3 months of a test, I'll bring y'all back on site and we'll go through everything we've learned and see what your comfort level is then. And I won't go forward if you're not happy with the results. So small window, I found out time.
Yeah, that's a short window.
In the September board meeting, and we're talking now, and they've got the support, and they know that everybody wants this money banked, everybody wants the transparency, the accountability, and the money's getting into the system one way or not another. So why not make it transparent, right? Why not do it right?
Yeah.
And that was it. They all wanted the money banked, but the legislation wasn't going to support getting it banked. So, I said to myself, and I said to the board, legislation has to catch up. 7 years later, legislation has to catch up because it's the right thing to do. And so I think we can do this. And they had two concerns at that point in time. One of them was the illegality, of course, and, their risk. And the second thing was, my contract was up in November and you can't start a project and not be here. So
Right.
I wouldn't let them write a contract. I said, I will promise to stick this out to the first exam. And if we crash and burn in the first exam, which was June the following year, 2015, then we can exit gracefully and you don't have any liability with the CEO. So that's exactly what we did. And the board decided to let us move through a test, get the review of legal, CPA, regulator, make sure everybody was agreeable that we're on the right track. And that came out really positive for us. Wow. And then we just kept moving forward.
Wow. That's, the point where you talk about the legislation catching up, I can't help but be reminded of sort of crypto's on a similar path. And I'm sure that you've thought of that. It has it's not the same problem. There isn't the issue of, the safety and all that, but there is in some ways, there's a lot of similarities in my mind on that whole thing. How do they hold it? What does it look like? And I feel like it's on a similar path. It'd be, I hadn't thought about it until you just started talking about it. So I did some research before we got here. By research, I don't mean I went and bought a bunch of edibles and I had a good night. No, I mean that I looked into what they're doing these days. My kids partake. They're here in Colorado. I'll be honest about it. And I asked them, I said, how do you pay for this stuff? And they said, oh, anymore I can use my card. And I said, how the heck are you doing that? And so they explained the process. And what I realized they were doing, Kevin, I throw this at Kevin because Kevin and I are the debit ATM guys. They're doing like a ATM. It's like you're getting money out and then they're just giving you the difference of what you got the money out. It's like you're doing an ATM withdrawal, but I don't think there's any record of it. Is that what's happening? It sounded like it.
Yeah. It's called cashless ATMs. So this is the whole world of, technology that started opening up to us that we had to learn. And you really want to go into denial because it's hard enough to learn cannabis, but then you get hit with closed loop systems, cashless ATMs, all this stuff. And cashless ATMs they're still a little controversial, but they're used throughout. It's a pure debit transaction. Mm-hmm. And it is just like an ATM withdrawal, and they give you back the difference and they round it up. So, we accept cashless ATM funds for our clients. Okay. But we make sure that the rails that they're running this on are aware that they're putting cannabis funds through them. So they have to be transparent with the system all the way through.
So you called Chuck over at PSCU and said, or over at, the other guy over at Todd over at Co-op and said, hey, listen, I just want to let you know, you just, label that one cannabis. That'd be fine. It's interesting because to your point, I asked the kids if I could look at one of the transactions in their account, and they bank here at the Credit Union, fantastic credit union in the Colorado Springs area. And I'm sure Chad and Randy and all the other ones that have been there. And you're right.
I married Charles Emmer.
Yes, I know you're married to Charles, but I was throwing in that thing, but I didn't want to take that the other way. But yeah, so we looked at the transaction online, and it does look exactly like you hit an ATM. There's no sign of it being from I couldn't find any name of the vendor. It just looked like we had used an ATM in a gas station or something. Is that kind of how they've been approaching it?
Yeah. Now, best practices, and there's good reason. Best practices is to get their name on the receipt and get it in the bank statement. Okay. But this is also why it's going to be a cash-heavy business for a long time, right? Because people don't want that on the records. So think about that. But
for example, if you work for the government, you won't pass the background test. Because it's still a federal issue, and there's so many people in the Springs that do that. So yeah.
But why is the best practice is because of returns and chargebacks. They don't know where that charge is coming from, right? But if they knew, if it was their cannabis shop, maybe they wouldn't do returns. So returns are higher when they don't know the vendor charging their account.
Can you return cannabis? Like, hey, this wasn't good enough, not strong enough, need different cannabis. I don't know. I mean, I hadn't thought about returns as a retailer. Yeah, you need this back. This wasn't good. I guess you can. It makes sense. I mean, it's a product. Product's a product.
Like returning a head of lettuce at the grocery store.
Yeah. So Sundie, by the way, tell Charles and Randy. I don't know why you don't have Randy involved in this. Randy would be the perfect, if anyone could drive it through legislation, it'd be Bernstein. And I would love to hear him talk about it. It'd be great.
We actually, we do a lot of talking with Randy still.
I would. That's how I would do it. Because, you know, if anyone just, even though he probably doesn't condone the practice, I could just see it in him. He would like, oh yeah, that's dumb. We got to do this. It's just, I know Randy pretty well. So if you're Zach Eichner, who's on the phone from Forefront Credit Union, and this is now legal in his state. I assume he's here with Dave because they're interested in discovering how they might get into this business. Zach, you mind unmuting? And Zach, am I right?
Yeah. We actually started a cannabis baking program earlier this year. And so we have one client that we already brought on. I think another one that is in final discovery to fund their account soon. We have an armored car service that we provide with that, have a fee structure built around it, and put that money in through one of our branch locations. So we're trying to get enough accounts that we can kind of run that test and see how things are going. We've built our structure so far, but I'm still really interested to hear a lot of the feedback and kind of what we should be doing, some of those best practices and trying to figure that out. And what surprised us was we heard so much about there's all these businesses and they can't get banked. And if you start offering it, they're going to beat the door down. And that has just not been our experience. Again, we're 7 months in, we have one account and we're close to the second one. And it's been hard to kind of get into the market more than we thought it would have been. And I don't know if that's just because we're in rural northern Michigan, but we are working forward on that. So
Zach, well, first of all, Zach, this is really important. Melissa, can you pull up that screen? I have help for you. We've got something that you can be ready to do. So we'll share that here. And it turns out that Sundie has written a book, and it's a really good book. So she's going to pull up the Amazon for that. I think if you're really doing that, you want to go to her book, Navigating Safe Harbor. And we're going to be giving away a couple. So if we have your emails, we're going to give away 2. So if you happen to win, but if not, we definitely want you to read that, because this book, I think, would be helpful for everyone trying to figure this out. But what say you to that, Sundie, that he's been in business for 7 months? He has an armored car service. That's pretty crazy. It sounds like, that's probably riding on your coattails, I would imagine. And he only has one. Is it hard to get clients? I would think it would be easy if you walked in the door and said, listen, I got a solution to every one of your crazy problems. It would seem like it would just be shooting fish in a barrel to bring these guys aboard.
Well, not so much anymore. Competition's out there. And in Michigan, there are several financial institutions already doing it and have been doing it for over a year and a half at this point in time. And so they've got a pretty good portfolio. And I would just say that pricing pressures are on, and the reputation. So the people getting into it now, the financial institutions getting into it now, don't have the longevity. So they still have this trust factor problem with financial institutions. Are you going to stay in it? Are you going to be here next month? Are you going to jump in and get out, right? Though that trust factor is huge because they've gone through so many bank accounts and they want reliability. So over time, you can prove yourself and that will get better. But, the market in Michigan is nearing $1 billion, I think, if I recall correctly. And, just to give you an example, we at Safe Harbor processed just over $3 billion last year ourselves. And
$3 billion just from cannabis providers.
Yeah, and this year we're going to probably near $4 billion. We're on track.
$4 billion. That's as big in deposit wise as, really big credit unions. That puts you in a top 50 category as a corporate credit union or a commercial credit union in that space, right?
Well, it's cash flow. So that's the interesting thing about these businesses. Everybody thinks they're rolling in cash, right? But the tax rate is
Oh,
so
it's back in
high.
and back out.
And they-
Are you lending to them? Can you lend to
Yes.
them?
Yes, we are lending to them, but now we have the disadvantage of regulators just holding us off,
Yeah.
not to mention the 15 exams we went through in 5 years. You know,
Yeah, but that was
painful,
good. I mean, you
painful.
proved it out by doing that. So
But so we finally, said, we've got to get into lending or we're going to lose our clients and you're going to get in the way of that business relationship. So we did start lending and we're starting out slowly doing commercial real estate lending, really good, solid lending. I see a lot of financial institutions wanting to jump into lending very quickly. But the fact of the matter is you have to know your customer. That KYC aspect means, do you know the money? Do you know their business? And do you know the owners? Because there's still forfeiture and seizure that's out there if something illegal goes on site with one of those companies. So
Yeah.
so I always say, get the depository relationship, get to know them for 6 months, and then start the lending process. Don't try to jump into lending first unless you got somebody else doing your BSA that's in the business.
So it would seem to me that beyond the lending, and I know this is a service I believe you're providing, and I'm wondering if Zach does, that the ATM service, the ATM debit POS, are you providing that as part of the platform? Because that's what I would imagine the commercial banking would include in theirs as well. Basically that debit ATM platform, because you were saying that it would cut through PSCU or co-op or one of the credit providers.
We don't endorse cashless ATMs at this point in time. Doesn't mean that they don't have a track record because they're doing it. And the processor that they're running it through is well aware because they're all running it through the same processor. So we know they know, and we know that they're aware of it. So we're comfortable with doing it. But there has been some controversy around certain venues in terms of payments. So we don't endorse, we do accept, and we don't tell our clients they can't use it. We do endorse closed loop systems and other third-party payment processors. That would include payroll, that would include ACH transfers. There's just several different models. There's a wallet model. Those things we do, but it takes a while to learn those. And in fact, I wrote, it's now about 60 pages of procedures just on third-party payment processing, because when you start banking third-party payment processors, now you got to know the KYCC, you got to know their customer, and how do you know that their customer is legal? How do you know they're licensed? How can you trust them to run money through your account? So it gets a little more complicated. So the other systems that we have been able to do some good business with are a lot of the closed loop systems or ACH models.
At one point I was working with Deborah out in California around the idea, because one of the things I believe, and you can tell me if this is a myth or not, but what they told me was when they initially asked me to design, so they asked me to take a blockchain technology and create a closed loop model, not a crypto model, but a closed loop permission model. And I developed it. I didn't build it, but I laid it out and said, this is what it would look like. And one of the purposes of it was, apparently, this is what they told me. Again, you'll know better than I, that you were only allowed to buy so much THC in a week or something. They were supposed to be tracking it. Like, you shouldn't be able to go in and buy here, give me just everything off the shelf. There's a limit to what you can get. But the reality is you can get around that limit because you just go to a different store and there's no way the other store knows anything about the other store. And so that was kind of where I was like, oh, well, could solve that problem with a permission-based blockchain closed loop system that could provide that service at a fee, but at the same time process for much cheaper and create a depository float platform that would handle that. Is that a true statement about the THC?
Oh, absolutely. You can go in and they limit the amount of THC you can purchase in any one visit. Right. And then what they call it is looping. So, if somebody wants to get in there and loop, they just keep going back in, even into the same. That's when you get problems like with the owners, right? Now you're allowing looping to go on. What are they doing with looping? They're selling it on the black market or whatever the case may be. Who knows what they're doing? But then their point of sale system should be able to catch that. They should know unless they're intentionally supporting the looping. But if you're doing cash purchases, there's not a whole lot of tracking, right? So again, Yeah, so with blockchain, I once had a regulator tell me that blockchain would be a great answer to managing cannabis and being
Well,
safe.
I still have everything if you want it. Nobody ever did anything with it. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I'll send it to you after. I literally have like 10 pages that nobody ever paid for. That's mine, so you can have it. So how many clients do you have that's producing the 4 billion for this year?
We have about 550 clients.
So wow, so that's like 100 million-ish per client in throughput and cash flow.
Well, funny you should ask, because I had to do an analysis on this the other day, and the average deposit on those 500 accounts is just over $800,000 a piece. That's the average. But now we have some large clients, and they're putting $6 million a month in. So you got to, there's high end, low end. So there's a lot of funds from some of the big players.
So what's your advice to Zach, who's 7 months in and one client? Like, is it because you were first in? Is it because you're going about it a different way? Should Zach be hanging out down at the meetups for cannabis, or what's your advice? I'm sure that's what Zach wants to hear. Maybe I'm wrong, Zach. Tell me if I'm out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, plenty of market research. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So what's your advice?
You want me to give you my trade secrets, huh?
Yeah.
Unless you're moving in on his territory.
No, I'm not moving in on Michigan. You're good there. It's become very competitive, and here's what's happening. The players that were in the front running position, we certainly got the benefit, and there's a lot of loyalty with these companies. So long as you treat them right, they're going to remember who gouges them and who doesn't gouge them. And so they want real relationships. And we have always prided ourselves on being kind of the low-cost provider. And in the market, we did. And they have remembered that and have been loyal to us. As far as gaining new customers, it's a little more difficult. We didn't have to spend any dollars on marketing for 6 years. It wasn't until last fall where we actually put a marketing budget in place for our clients. So now we are moving in that direction. And I think we have success by attending the cannabis conferences, speaking at cannabis conferences, that type of thing, letting them get to know us, being able to tout our experience of being in our 7th year makes a difference to them. And not something I intentionally knew we were going to do, but, the brand Safe Harbor is paying dividends for us in this particular instance.
That's a great name. So I'd like to volunteer to send Kevin to the next cannabis conference to just tell. I'd like to, and also Lawson. Lawson probably isn't as big a deal, but Kevin, I'd like to send, and Zach wants to go as well. So do you get a booth at the cannabis conference?
Yeah, some of them. We do.
And
we do.
Are you like between the edible and like what do they do? Is it like Aquarium where there's guys selling accounting systems and guys selling closed loop systems and I guess people selling new product to pull into now you got me curious on what the cannabis conference looks like. I'm just trying to picture the Scimitar Cannabis Conference or the Correlation Cannabis Conference. Maybe
you would be surprised. We
Really?
just went to the Michigan. We went to the Michigan Cannabis Conference just last week or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and there were 5 financial institutions there. And then you have payment processors. A lot of the closed loop systems are in there. You have people selling lights, people selling dirt, people selling.
Lights and dirt. That makes sense because they're growers, right? Do you also finance the growers, like all the people up in Pueblo and their big warehouses? Is that part of the financing as well?
We can, yeah. Right now we're focusing on, like I said, real estate, and we are launching line of credits for our known customers, right? Some of them have been banking with us in their 7th year, so why wouldn't I give them a line of credit? I know their money.
They're loyal. It's the same difference as a member who's been a member for 10 years and they can only put $300 in the ATM. That's crap. That was Randy's complaint, from the first day I met him. One of the first things we worked on together. So yeah, I could see how that would build up over time. Well, let's open it up to some questions. Does Zach, do you have any more questions? Or there's a lot of folks on. Like I see, we have Gary Coates, and I know it's legal where he's at. You know, I'm just interested in to hear what the group has to say. Gary?
Hey, John.
Hey.
Hi, Sundie. Yes, I recently started at Wana Credit Union, and we provide services to cannabis businesses. But I'm new there, and so I haven't learned what we are currently doing. I do know that we are providing services to some of the businesses, but some of the questions I have for them is I don't know if we're doing transactions, if they're doing transactions with the cashless ATM approach, or if we're actually processing cards. The looping thing, I'm going to ask, are we tracking for that? That kind of thing. So I have more questions, I guess, right now than I have answers to look into it. And I don't know how many cannabis businesses we currently have relationships with. I know there's a few, but I don't know how many.
So that raises a great question. You know, one of the things over the years, Sundie, and I'm sure that you experienced this as well, was, you know, a lot of cranes getting into commercial, but I found that they tended to dip their toe in it, and then they wondered why they only got the you know, the laundromat and the guy running the vending machines, and they didn't get, you know, the big downtown local business, you know, bringing that commercial business to them. And it's because they dipped their toe in it, they never really learned the needs of those folks. And people like Mercantile in Florida were just kicking our butts, you know, and that was when I was at GTE with Bucky, and he really wanted to get into that space. Is there a similar concept going on here in the Crayon space where, oh, somebody laid this out, yeah, we could do it, and they wind up with a few clients, and that's really where it ends? Or do you think that there's a natural connection between the two, you know, the two kinds of concepts, the Crayon philosophy and what it is? You pointed that out in the beginning of your talk, and the, you know, the cannabis culture and the cannabis industry.
I think it boils down to resources. Okay, so when I tell you we are processing over $300 million a month, we're probably filing 1,000 reports a month.
SARS reports?
Well, SARS, CTRs.
Oh, wow.
All those BSA reports with the federal government, FinCEN, right? So think about the resources. When you start getting hit with that type of labor, and they're not cookie cutter. I don't care what anyone will tell you. They're not cookie cutter. According to the regulations, you have to have pertinent information for law enforcement to use, which
so you
means
can't automate it.
Yeah, well, you can automate some of it because we do use an automated system for filing, but you still have to go through the process of explaining what they did the last quarter and, you know, what things are happening in that account. You can't just cookie cut everything that's in there. So resources, that's the biggest thing. But then the validation and monitoring. Our job as financial institutions is to protect the financial system. So in order to protect the financial system, we can't allow one illicit dollar to go in to infiltrate the financial system. That's the whole idea. And to do that, you have to know every one of those dollars coming into those accounts is legitimate. So how are you verifying all those dollars to make sure no dollars going through the system because your financial institution isn't validating those monies? The third thing is monitoring. So we've built a whole software package around everything our bankers have been doing for the last 7 years and trying to build their efficiencies. And there's a lot of things involved in there. But the monitoring process, you don't have a full system for any commercial account, but this is not a commercial account. This is a cannabis account. And so we have monitoring processes that they have to go through on a quarterly basis. You know, you have to keep much more in touch with these clients. Just to give you an example, BSA risk. If officers suddenly change, you have 3 officers who leave the company, and one of them happens to be the CFO, and you're looking at this company and saying, why are we having officers walk? You know, is something going on they can't support or stand behind? Or all of a sudden the ownership changes. Now, when you did your due diligence right from the beginning, you're doing the gatekeeping, trying to keep them out of the organization. But now in the midst of a year, you get 2 new owners. And we've seen this happen. And one of those owners happens to have some black market dealings through relatives. So, you have to, and if you're not watching this on a quarterly basis, you could get stuck finding something, or your regulators can get, to the point where they're finding something because you weren't monitoring enough. So the resources necessary to get this job done, I think, is what people start to realize. And the big money that comes in now that they're actually getting. There was, in 2018, when we first started seeing capital enter the United States from Canada, right? Tens of millions of dollars. There wasn't a week we didn't get a call from one of our clients who said, I need to drop $80 million into my account next week. We're only 600 million at this point in time, but we are sweeping nearly $100 million off balance sheet at the end of each month in order to maintain our ratios and our safety and soundness. So ideally, in the book, I was the first one to tell the board 6 months in when I was writing this book that we had no right at $300 million getting into this industry, but how would you know? Because they were all under the radar.
Right.
You didn't know, right? And it wasn't until they started coming in the door and we started seeing the magnitude of the business they're doing. And then when they got banking, they just were able to go to other states and get licenses. So now you go to the next BSA risk. Can you leave them unbanked in Nevada when they're banked in Colorado?
Yeah.
BSA risk. No, you have to know all their money. So now you're forced to follow your client out of town, out of
Wow.
state, and so the BSA risk climbs and it climbs in your program. It's an emerging process on your BSA. BSA is tied to the size of your portfolio, the activities in the industry, and it must always move forward with what you're doing.
Yeah. It's a great point. I do want to get to this before the end of it. I want to find out target audience for the book, but just a quick question on that. So, well, first of all, did you tell them that they could find, I think it would be 1,000 ATMs at under $9,000 and they could deposit their 80 million or somewhere around there? They should be able to put it in that way. That's what I would have told them. You just got to find 1,000 ATMs and put it in for under that. But $80 million coming in from one capital, that's bigger than most commercial business of even the biggest credit unions that we're seeing. They're running commercial directly. Royal, those kinds of guys, they're not seeing that kind of business come through. So that had to have been a big surprise. The BSA concepts are a huge surprise. So we have a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to point out. I thought that Cody had a good question. And this is going to be my question to you is, okay, Sundie, so you've pioneered this. How does it in Colorado is clearly a leader, right? This is where we see it starting. They seem to be ahead of everybody else. And I think Cody's asking the question, is there a DoorDash? But in general, how do you see this playing in the next 5 years? How do you see this playing out? And how do you react to that business? Does it get to the point where it's legalized to the point where it's no longer a competitive opportunity? Or does it get to the point where you finally can do a whole bunch of other things, and because you've gathered all these clients to begin with, you have a huge competitive advantage to start providing services and things that as they become legal? I'm just curious. I think that's kind of what Cody's question is.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do see legalization being talked about more and more, but Safe Banking Act is going to be, a big step forward. Mm-hmm. But Safe Banking Act, while it may relieve the credit union officers and board members from prosecution for simply banking cannabis, it does not take away the risk we fear most, which is the BSA risk. That doesn't go away. FinCEN has every right to come in and maneuver against any financial institution not covering their BSA obligations. Just to give you an example, and you're going to love this one. We have an internal auditor who just focuses on our cannabis business to make sure that everybody knows we're watching it closely. And it was one year she came in and she's like, oh, I pulled all these CTRs and your bankers didn't fill out this line with the correct courier when they switched couriers. So what did we have to do? We had to self-report to FinCEN and say, we have 6,000 reports that weren't filed correctly. FinCEN was nice. They gave us 60 days to refile 6,000 reports. 60
oh my
days.
gosh.
Yeah, right.
And every one of those has to be done manually because it needs actionable information for legal to follow up on.
Oh, well, lucky for us, we had the original report. We just had to fix that one line, but you still had to go through 6,000 reports in 60 days. And, when you're in a leadership position, the last thing you can do is fail, right? So we had to really, put our nose to the grindstone and get that job done. And we finished 2 weeks early, if I recall correctly.
Wow.
So these are the
That's-
things that won't go away.
Mm-hmm. But the things that will change, you could be in a position to provide an excellent closed loop system in the future. You definitely are in a great position to lend, both for cash flow, I would imagine. Do you do any invoice lending, that sort of thing?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's on the list of things, but first, you've got to walk before you run, and you've got to get comfort with the lending process, start with real estate, go with really well-known lines of credit, and, then we'll get into, construction, equipment, that kind of thing, real solid things. So I think that, we'll progress, but we've always been pretty methodical about how we do things. And, we're not of the size where we can just take big risks. We've got to do it in a manner that doesn't put the credit union in harm's way.
So
But what do I see happening? That was the
let's
question
take
there.
that. Yeah, where do you see it going?
I think that if Safe Banking Act passes, we're going to see a lot of people jump in, a lot of financial institutions jump in, realize what I've told you about resources, and end up saying, it's too competitive, the pricing pressures are on, can't justify all the extra resources, not thinking I want to go down this road. I always like to ask people, do you bank money service businesses? And if you were to take a look at 10 credit unions around you and ask that question, how many would say yes to money service businesses? Now, cannabis is probably 2 times as difficult as money service businesses. So when we went back to the examiners and said, we're going to, we want to do money service businesses, and they absolutely refused us in 1 year and said, that's not a good path for you to go down. Then we implemented cannabis. And a year later, 2 years later, we said, we'd really like to go back to money service businesses and start that program out. And they're like, oh, have at it. It's about 45% of the work that you're doing for cannabis. So, it's not going to be something everybody can jump into, because people are already not doing casinos. They're not doing money service businesses. Why would you jump in with something that's high risk and not already have high risk?
Yeah, and I think that's a important point. I think that you were solving a problem, and I love where you started with it from a safety safety point of view. So tell us a bit about the book. Tell us a bit about who should read your book.
Interestingly enough, and people never believe me when I tell them this, the reason I wrote that book, it had a couple of purposes, right? First of all, I'm highly introverted by nature. I can spend 90% of my time alone, and I have to recover every time that I do public speaking. It's just not my easy ground. And so I was complaining to the PR person who was helping us, and I said, I'm getting all these phone calls and inquiries, and it's just exhausting me. And she said, write a book, write all the questions down, write a book. Tell them to read the book, and then you can have it more meaningful. So the book was really meant to say, here's what it takes to start up a program, and see if you have the stomach to go through this process. And then we'll talk a little further about it. The other thing is we were front runner here, right? And the risk was high. And if we were the only one in the risk pool, and there were maybe 5 of us in the risk pool at that point in time, we were, that risk pool is small, which means all the attention gets focused on those financial institutions. By putting a book out there and encouraging people to consider opening a program themselves, suddenly it was going to reduce my risk in that small risk pool by increasing the risk pool, right, of candidates they had to monitor.
That makes a lot of sense.
The third thing is, I wanted to be so transparent with this. Shut us down and shut us down fast if you're not going to support the activities of what we were doing and that we were being transparent. So we're either going to bank this and we're going to do the right thing and legislation is going to catch up to us, or, shut us down because we're being transparent.
Yeah. And I think I think you're even pointing that out when you go straight to the auditors and say, hey, Henson, we blew it on 6,000 reports. I mean, that speaks to the integrity of the organization. And if I'm looking at your organization, I'm going, okay, well, clearly they intend to be in line. And I would imagine that that's something else that your clients appreciate, because they can't have you going out of business. And so the stability after 7 years, I would imagine, also creates that opportunity. Okay, so my next question. So if you had it all to do again, besides feeding Randy all the edibles, what would you do different?
I would move a little faster, not in the beginning, not when we didn't know anything about the industry, but I probably would move a little faster into blending than I did. But you know, we really had, when you're going through 15 exams, you're just trying to stay alive, right? You know, it wasn't the last exam, the 14th exam. I had VPs coming to me and saying, I can go down the street for another credit union and I don't have to go through this crap with Partner Colorado anymore. And that was when I really said, you know, if they're not here next year, it's your fault, examiners. Not that they haven't stuck with it for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe nobody has to go through that pain anymore, because they would bring in 21 DSA officers a shot at these exams.
Wow.
I mean, this is the only way they could learn, right? Being on site. And that's a lot of pain for everybody to go through. So maybe I would have tried to maneuver through the NCUA a little easier, but I'm not sure, being a front runner and the volume that we were processing, you know, and the steps we were taking. Like when we took money from Canada, not everybody would take money from Canada, right? But we put protective measures in place. Or, you know, when we went to third-party payment processors, not everybody would go out there and start testing that, but we would. So we were always pushing the envelope to stay up with the industry. I don't think I would have changed much else at this point in time, because I think we did it slow, we did it methodically, and as safely and soundly as we possibly could.
Well, clearly by your success. And I was just wondering, I do, the sign of a really innovative business is when you hear someone say, I would have gone harder and faster at this particular point. Because now you see what you see in hindsight, you see that. So I had the pleasure of working with Deirdre O'Gorman, who you probably know, from Belco before she started at Four Corners, or Fourth Corner. Did you work with her at all at the time? And I remember talking, what's that?
Oh, we have a really good relationship with Deirdre. In fact, we're going to be speaking on a panel here coming up, and
very cool.
She has been, you know, she was a pioneer with the whole Fourth Corner, and that was a really difficult situation that she went through, but she has taken that and she has maneuvered. You know, I personally think she's brilliant with what she's done with her business model, and she was there in every state that we went to. She was right there supporting us all the way. So
you still work with
I
her
owe her
for
a debt.
So you're using her services for the pickups and stuff as well, huh?
A great deal.
Yeah, exactly. We big help do some work with her on that. We initially worked with her close on that. Yeah, I think that was a question from Mike. You know, and what it says is that the superpower of credit unions has always been collaboration. You know, you being married to Charles, you having all this experience, 38 years of pushing this through, working with the board and partners, working with the group there, and having the ability to collaborate with Deirdre and others. I think that's what this whole thing is about. And I love that we're being candid, because I do think that as credit unions see margins shrink, you know, and we're seeing that shrink in a lot of ways. We're being cut up by Venmo or being cut up by crypto. You know, you talked about the spread earlier and staying in this, you know, in the legal space where you want to be for the spread based on the inflow. And I think credit unions are going to start looking at things like this, and I worry that they're not going to go into it eyes wide open. And I love that you wrote the book to help understand that, because I feel like we did this in the 2000s early on with commercial, and a lot of people wound up with some accounts, but I've never, I knew people that were really good at it, like Royal was fantastic at it out in Wisconsin, but there were others that just, when we do conversions or do home banking, oh yeah, we need a commercial. Okay, but how many clients you got? 6. So you really want to spend $1 million on an interface for 6 clients? That's kind of, you could personally hire someone to call them every day and do their bidding for for that money if you're not going to grow the business. And it sounds like that is definitely a place. Just a random question. This is something that I'm just thinking about. So I'm thinking about what you're working on. I'm thinking my problem is I hate manual work. I'm lazy. And so I tend to program my way out of manual work. And I'm thinking about what you're going through. And we've been looking into a lot of different things. And a very similar thing is what JP Morgan went through with their contractual obligations around real estate and other things. They built an artificial intelligence platform called Coin that was looking through the contract language to build very specific replies to those. And they wound up cutting out like 360,000 hours of legal services. I'm betting there's something there, especially with all the natural language processing that's going on. Something where at least one person could handle a throughput of 10x by the AI getting it close and having someone take a look. So do you think that AI is going to play into your business in the future for modeling for and then my other question would be, what other adjacent businesses you've been looking at? We talked about the growers, but what about the light guys and all those other things? So those 2 things, I'll leave it at that. And I could keep going for hours because I'm fascinated by this. But
So I think we're talking about coin and being virtual currency, right?
No, Coin was an AI concept. So Coin was an AI thing that would read all the contracts and it would pull out very specific language, develop its own language and reply to that, and then re-up the contracts with the clients, which could be something in the same vein with natural language processing that's similar to what you're having to do with the reports you're sending in. So I just think there's an opportunity there, but I don't know if it's something you looked into.
Yeah, I believe AI is going to touch everything we're doing at some point in time. Even cannabis, it's forthcoming and it's going to be far better for all parties, especially in predicting models, surrounding BSA. So, yeah. And as far as I think the second question was, do we touch the ancillary providers?
Yeah,
this is really, really interesting, because I've held from the very beginning, and I've said it 100 times on stage, if money laundering is going to happen, it's going to happen in the ancillary companies because they're not being regulated or monitored by any regulatory authority. Like the cannabis industry is so highly regulated, there are points of validation across the board that you can use to get security with that money. But now you got $5 or $6 million coming into an ancillary account. How do you monitor that? Are you monitoring that? Those ancillary accounts are in every other financial institution out there. And if they don't have some type of monitoring program, chances are that ancillary can be, their BSA issue. I had one of our credit unions who does business with us, and he's like, we're not doing ancillary because you've told us over and over if money laundering is going to happen, it's going to happen in ancillary. And I said, ancillary is a risk, but not doing ancillary is a bigger risk, right? Because you can see the money flowing between your clients, and you can put a monitoring. So we have a monitoring program for ancillary. We charge them a little more because if they're doing, a certain percentage of their business with cannabis, they require monitoring. That not to the extent of cannabis, but you definitely should be watching those ancillaries that are doing business.
So like a good way to launder money would be, hey, light guy, I'm going to pay you, way more for these lights than you deserve, and we got to keep track of that because that's how they could sort of spin that around. Okay, I get it. But you're saying that you can, and because I feel like, to Cody's point, there will be ancillary businesses beyond the medical, beyond the lighting. We're now seeing the CBD portion of it. CBN has been a rising winner, and so those portions of it, which are far more legal, and are making, you can go into. It cracks me up. You can go into Ace Hardware and get CBD now. It's, and let's ask that question. I guess if you have time for one more, just because I'm curious, how is it, you're married to Charles, you guys are, and all of a sudden you're saying, hey, you know where I'm going with this. I'm jumping into the weed business, and get your weed hat on. And I mean, there was definitely a social aspect of this, and it took time for people to come to terms with it. How has that felt for you, and what's that look like in terms of the social acceptance of it?
It wasn't good in the beginning. I will tell you, the only time that Charles and I ever fought was during the first 6 months of this project. But remember, he was also retiring. He retired.
I know. I watched. Yeah,
project,
yeah.
so
Randy made it very clear. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not something he would have done. But I did literally go to him in January of 2015, and I said, it's a one-time offer. If you want to protect your assets and everything from me, I will divorce you this month. It's a one-time offer. So,
was he worried the feds were going to come take you away?
Well, everything's at risk when you don't know, right?
Yeah,
you
it's
don't
true.
know.
Fair.
If they're going to prosecute somebody, I was front and center. I was making all the decisions. I was doing all the onboarding. I was writing all the procedures and policies. So, I told my staff, if they come in, I'll take, I fall on my sword at this point in time because I'm the one leading y'all down this road.
So when did you guys get remarried?
He didn't take me up on it.
Oh,
It was a little spat. A little spat a couple of years later, and I'm like, yeah, that offer's off the table.
Well, listen, thank you so much for joining. And there's just a lot of questions here. I really appreciate your time. I know this is hard for you, and thank you for taking the time to doing it and spending some time with us. And I'm sure there are other questions that people have, and please send them my way. Gary, I'm sure Sundie, anything that comes through, I'll send it your way. And we gave away a couple of copies of your book, so we're excited about that. And if you haven't, we'll put the link for Amazon in there. So that's one way to keep from asking Sundie questions, is she wrote the book in a way that you can use it to determine your part of the business. And then I guess we'll see you at the next cannabis conference. I'm sure Kevin will be there. So I actually will give you Kevin to work your booth for free if you want. So you just let me know.
Well, I think there's a PDF version for half the price on our website still. So
even better.
Go there.
Even better. Well, you're a powerhouse. People are already giving you props here, and it's amazing that you drove this forward. It took a force of will, and knowing Deirdre like I do, you two together would be very dangerous. So I'm sure that was pretty amazing. Well, thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Sundie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sundie.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.